Today we're going to talk about bread. Bread is one of those things that I'm asked about more than anything on my website. Gluten-free bread has a really bad reputation for being tasteless and being very dry. Now, when you make your own bread at home, you can absolutely overcome those things. There are really good ways to make great gluten-free bread. So let's talk a little bit about the ingredients. When I make gluten-free bread, I use really good quality ingredients. I use milk powder, and I use real eggs, and I use egg whites, and I use butter. Those things all give the bread a really good taste. It also helps us control the dough, and it gives it really good structure and a really nice crumb feel. In the bakery business, they talk a lot about how things feel on your mouth. So you don't want a bread that feels gooey or stodgy. You don't want one that feels dry, like cookie crumbs. You want something that feels nice and soft and spongy. So that's what these good ingredients will get you. The second thing you have to remember is the way gluten-free bread is made. When you're making wheat bread, you would normally take it out of the mixer and put it in a bowl and let it rise. And then you'd punch it down, and you'd take it out and you'd knead it, so you're touching the dough a lot. And then you'd portion it out into the different pans, and then you'd let it rise again, and then you'd bake it. Well, gluten-free bread is made differently. Once we get it in the mixer and we're ready, we put it directly in the pans or the portions that we need. We let it rise. Once it's risen once, it's ready to bake. It's a lot simpler. And it's something that you can get very good at. Now, the next thing we want to talk about is the equipment. A heavy-duty mixer really helps. We've got a lot of heavier ingredients, and we've got about double the number of ingredients that you'd normally have in wheat bread, and so a heavy mixer helps an awful lot. The other thing is the bread pans. So this is the normal size loaf pan that somebody would have in their kitchen. If you make bread in this pan, you're going to get it this size. Traditionally, gluten-free bread doesn't rise very much above the top of the pan just because of the strength of the dough. So you're going to get a very small piece. And it's not really very good for a sandwich. You do see loaves, a lot of loaves this size available in the store. And that's not my idea of a good piece of bread. What I did in the bakery was I used a different pan. This pan is actually a steam tray pan. So if you've been out to buffets or if you've ever worked in a kitchen, they have a steam tray with hot water on the bottom and these pans sitting on top of them, and that keeps the food warm. So this is a 1/4 steam tray pan. So you can get 1/4, 1/3, 1/8, all different sizes. The 1/4 works best. And it's really good because it's got a line around the outside, which helps you gauge how much the dough has risen. This pan can be used over and over and over, and by spraying it, you season it a bit so it becomes non-stick after a while. This is a great pan. Now, the other thing that you want to do is get good recipes. I've got some good recipes. I love this book. This book is written by a couple of ladies from southeastern Ontario, Donna Washburn and Heather Butt, and it's amazing. They're actually very well known for writing bread machine recipes. So what they've done, really ingenious in this book, is they have 2 chapters on bread, one made by hand in a mixer and the other made in a bread machine. And you can configure your bread machine in most cases to just do 1 rise. That's the important part. And they've tweaked the recipes a little bit so that they work really good in a bread machine. So if you want to use a bread machine instead of a mixer, there's really good ways to do it. So let's get started. We're going to make white bread now. So what I've tried to do is keep with ingredients that are easy to find. You can buy them in bulk and you can keep them at home and always have them on hand. So we're using a flour mixture and we're also using yeast. So let's start our yeast. So we're going to start with some warm water. Now you're going to put sugar in the water and that's going to help feed the yeast. And we've got our yeast here and a little bit of vinegar. Vinegar conditions the dough and makes it nice and soft. So let's just put that down and we're just going to mix it. There we go. So now the yeast is going to start blooming now that it's all wet, and we're going to get the other ingredients ready in the meantime. In this recipe, we're using white rice flour, and then we're using a combination of tapioca flour or starch, potato starch, guar gum, and salt. And then we have skim milk powder that we're going to add as well. And to the wet ingredients, we're going to add egg whites and we're going to add eggs. Oh, I had a baker who taught me a really good trick about eggs. If you've got more than one egg, if you crack them together, only one will break. There we go. So don't be afraid about cracking eggs together. So the yeast is starting to bloom now because we used warm water, and then we're going to use more water as well when we start putting the wet ingredients in. So let's just start this up. So normally in breads we would use a combination of flours and starches. The reason that I said tapioca, we've got some egg whites, I said tapioca flour or starch is because it's the same thing. Tapioca itself is pretty well all starch. So sometimes you'll see it referred to as tapioca flour and sometimes you'll see it referred to as tapioca starch. So I'm just adding alternately our dry ingredients and our wet ingredients. The nice thing with gluten-free recipes usually is that you can dump everything in because we're not concerned about the gluten developing, and you just want to make sure that it's mixed enough that there's no lumps. So this recipe is going to make 2 large loaves. There's different things we can do with the loaves, and today we're going to make 1 large white loaf, and we're also going to make some hamburger buns and some dinner rolls, all out of this same dough. You can do lots of things with this dough. I use it to make raisin bread, and I also use the same dough if I'm going to make hot cross buns at Easter. I'll use the same dough and I'll add raisins and fruit to it. Now, let me just finish adding these, and we're just going to let it go on high for a couple of minutes so that it's really nice and smooth, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how I put it in the pans. So I've added all of the ingredients in. Don't worry if you do get some flare-ups of flour. A lot of our starches are very, very light, and they do tend to want to flare up out of the mixer. The last thing we're going to add is melted butter. Now, when I've got my pans, when I'm readying my pans, you can use a spray, canola oil spray or something, on the pans, or you can use some of the butter if you don't want to use a spray. There we go. So, now that we've added the butter, I'm just going to let it mix just for a moment till the butter gets incorporated, and then we're going to be ready. So today we're going to make a bread loaf. We're going to make hamburger buns, and we're going to make dinner rolls. Now, if you were going to make raisin bread with this, now is the time that you would put in raisins, a bit of cinnamon. You can also add a bit of extra sugar if you'd like, and a pinch of nutmeg. But now's the time that you do that. So this makes 2 loaves. Oh. I can smell the yeast. Let's get this out of here. So what we want to do is, I know, and I'll say on the recipe, how much dough this makes. So if you want to make it into 2 loaves, the best thing to do is to weigh it out on a scale. So that's why I've got my scale here. So I'm going to turn my scale on, I'm going to set it to grams, and then I'm going to what they call tare it out, which means that I'm setting it back to 0. And now I know that I can put just over 900 grams in here. You'd probably equate this dough more to something like a pancake batter, a thick pancake batter. So it's wet enough that it will cover the whole pan and you wouldn't touch it. Now it's much too gooey. But the nice thing is it comes up to about here on this pan. So we're going to wait till it comes up to the line, and then we're going to put it in the oven, and then it's still going to rise a little bit more after that. So that's going to go into just a warm place. I like to turn my oven on to warm and then turn it off. Now I've got hamburger rings here, and these you can find at a lot of different kitchen supply stores or bulk stores. They have those. This is what some people use to make fancy eggs in the morning, but I really like them for hamburger buns. Now I know that my small scoop is about 1/3 of the size of the dough that I want to put in my hamburger buns. And it's the size that I want to make for my dinner rolls. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish scooping this out, and once I've got this into the rings, I'm just going to smooth it a little bit so that it goes to all the sides like this. My dinner rolls come out nice and round with this scoop and nice and even. So from 1 loaf of bread, I'll be able to make about 5 hamburger buns and anywhere between 6 and 9 of these small dinner rolls. When you're making different sizes of bread like this, you have to be very careful. Not so much about the rising time, because they'll take about the same amount of time to rise, but when you put them in the oven to bake, the smaller ones won't bake off nearly as quickly. So I'm going to put these in a nice warm place to rise, and I'll see you back and you can see what they look like when they're ready to go into the oven. They're going to go into a 400-degree oven. So we have the oven at 400. We've put the hamburger buns in when they were just getting up to the top of the rings. And as you can see, they've come out now and they continue to rise. They look lovely. The bread is now ready to go. It's just above this dimple that's on the side, and it's ready to go in the oven. We'll take it out. We'll know it's done because we're going to use a thermometer to measure, and it needs to be 190 degrees in the center of the bread, and that way we'll know it's done. So this is going to take 50 minutes, 55 minutes. Doesn't hurt to take it out and check it if you're not sure, but the whole place smells like bread already. So we're going to get the bread out of the oven. It looks done. Looks can be deceiving. We really do have to take its temperature. It needs to be 190 degrees as an internal temperature. Let's just watch this go up. In the bakery, we actually took the temperature of every group of breads when they came out of the oven, because we need to know that it's 190 degrees or they won't be done in the middle. If they're not done in the middle, they're going to sink, they're going to be stodgy in the middle, they're going to have a hole, and you'll never really know what went wrong. There we go. We're up to 190 degrees. This is done. We're going to let it cool on its top for a few minutes. Then we're going to flip it over. And once it's completely cooled, we can cut it. So the hamburger buns and the dinner rolls don't take nearly as long to bake off as the bread. You can usually tell by the look of them that they're done. Now because we put oil in these, they come out very easily. Look at that, nice thick hamburger bun. One thing to remember with gluten-free bread is that you should put it in the freezer very soon after you bake it. And it doesn't hurt if you put it in a bag while it's still a little bit warm, and then make sure that you put it in a dry bag before you put it in the freezer. So once you've frozen gluten-free bread, when you go to take it out of the freezer to use, put it in the microwave. From frozen, right in the microwave. And put it on till it's warm. Even if you're going to toast it, it gets so much more moisture back into it. I always put my bread in the microwave. So here we've got some lovely hamburger buns. And then we've got some dinner rolls. These came out very nicely as well. So if we had wanted to add some flavorings or something to the dinner rolls, we certainly could have. I like them just like this. Let's open them up and see what they're like inside. Oh, look. Oh, that's beautiful. It's got nice, consistent bubbles inside where the yeast has really done its job. It's nice and soft. Again, if you freeze it and then put it in the microwave, it comes out just like it came out of the oven. This is amazing gluten-free bread. And now you know how to make gluten-free bread, gluten-free buns, and gluten-free hamburger buns in your own home kitchen.